Okay, first off, I want to first say thank you. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're a returning job seeker, again, welcome. Um, you can ask questions one of two ways depending on how you logged into the workshop. You can raise your hand, I can unmute your mic, and you can verbally ask your question. If you logged in through your computer and you gave access to your mic, this would be a good way that you can use, or you can actually type your question in the bottom where it has the question panel. All questions I would like to hold to the end. I usually answer questions following the workshop. I really do urge everyone to submit their questions prior to the workshop. This way I can actually get them on the slides. And you have a little bit more of an elaborate, well thought out answer when you submit them before the workshop, rather than me coming up with an answer or giving you my best answer on the fly. You know, some of these questions that are asked, I do research on if needed, so you would definitely get a better answer if you submit them prior to the workshop. I usually start with a firm overview about Career Innovations. Career Innovations is an executive search firm. We were launched in 2007. We are a referral-based firm. We pride ourselves of innovative technology and tools to locate the best talent for our clients. Myself, Bridget Baggett, not only am I the founder of Career Innovation, I'm also the director of staffing and recruiting. I do see ourselves as true innovators. We come up with different ways and unconventional and untraditional methods to locate top talent. One of my true passions is organizational development and change. I truly believe that the organizational culture really is based on the company's core values, and it's the foundation for attracting and retaining top talent. If you see the slide, in addition to our HR and job seeker training, we also offer compensation benchmarking, referral, and retention workshops. Today's quote: an inch of movement will bring you closer to your goals than a mile of intentions. And I know there are a lot of people that I've come in contact with, and it's probably some people on the line as well, that, you know, they plan on doing something, or they're going to implement a new process or a new method, but they really never do it. And their intentions are great, you know, but intentions don't get you anywhere. So you actually implementing and executing that plan is going to bring you much more closer than your goals than just intending to do it. So I thought that was a very insightful quote. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go over some of the questions that will be answered today. Remember, you can always submit your question before the Q&A session by using the form to submit your question. We received about 7 or 8 questions today. I'm going to go over them very briefly, what they are. Some of the questions were redundant, and I actually combined some of the questions in the slides. So I will point that out when I get to the slides where I combined a question, because some of the questions were asked more than once. First question was, how should a person prepare and ace an interview? How do I distinguish myself from other job applicants? How do I make myself competitive for entry-level jobs right out of college? What are prospective employees looking for on LinkedIn before contacting a prospective employee for hire? How do I make myself marketable after being out of work for several years? Best ways to get an interview now. How can I move from the entertainment field to business and be taken seriously? How can I obtain a managerial position for a company with leadership skills in areas other than that particular job field? Last question was tips for career changers and how to get to the hiring manager. So we're going to cover all this. We have a lot to cover. Again, some of this will be covered in the same slide, and some questions that you may not have asked will also be covered. And again, don't hesitate throughout the workshop to put your questions in there. Once I finish up, I definitely will answer any questions that you may have. Okay, the first question was, how should a person prepare and ace an interview? And this is pretty much straightforward. if you do some research on some interview questions, there's so many questions out there that you can research and figure out what questions to pretty much be asked for far as behavior interviewing. And then you have your I call them your interviewing one-on-one questions that are usually asked in each interview, and I'll go over those as well. The first thing you need to do is research. If you know you have an interview and you're trying to prepare for the interview, research the company. A lot of people think this is a no-brainer. Well, it can be, but a lot of people rely solely on the company's website. Do you know how many times a company may even update their website? Some people only update it on a quarterly. Some companies may do it on an annually basis. So don't rely heavily on the company's website. When you do your research outside of the About Us page on a website, you should be looking for what is your company's competitors. If you're interviewing a company, you should know who their competitors are and what advantage the company has against their competitors and what the competitors have against the company that you're interviewing with. You should know about recent launches, projects they're working on. This information can be obtained not through the website. Some can. Nowadays a lot of companies are putting this on their website, but many companies are. You should be looking for newsletters, announcements, press releases. Using these keywords to Google this information will bring you up their most recent press release or their most recent launch. In most cases, these sources are going to be much more current than the website alone. So you don't want to solely rely on, let me just Google the company and go to their website. That information is pretty much standard. And honestly, they're going to expect you to know that information. The information that's going to the information that's going to blow their socks off is knowing their competitors, knowing the advantage that they have in the marketplace, and knowing how they can get ahead. That's what's going to blow them away. Not that you knew that they were launched in 1946 and you can give a historical background of the company. To them, they feel that that's on the website. Anyone that clicks on our link knows that information. We want to know that you did a little bit of homework outside of just spending 5 minutes on our website. So you want to do the research and you want to dig a little bit deeper than just the standard, I'm going to go to the website to the About Us page. Next thing you also want to do is know your interviewer. This should be something that you should ask when the interview is set up. If you're first going through a phone screen, the phone screen is usually done by a sourcer or by a recruiter. And most of the time, if you're going to either have a face-to-face or if they chose you to move forward in the recruiting process, you're going to be actually interviewing with a decision maker at that point, or someone that's going to be in the decision-making process. You need to know who that person is. Get a name. And that's something that you should do. And you can do this very directly by just asking. Our interview is scheduled for Monday, July the 3rd. May I ask who I be interviewing with? And this is not, top secret information. They'll let you know who you're interviewing with, and many times they'll let you even know the title of the person. Oh, you're going to be interviewing with Jim, the head of IT, or you're going to be interviewing with Mark, the head of business development. So they're more than likely going to tell you who you're going to be interviewing with, but a lot of people never ask, and they just go through the recruiting process without even initially knowing who their audience is going to be. So you want to know who your interviewer is. Once you get the name, you want to research the background. Get information about the hiring process. How long is this hiring process going to take? After I interview with this person, what are the next steps I'm looking for? Also use the technology that's out there to get a feel of the hiring process. There's no excuse now not to be prepared. We have Glassdoor. We have Indeed. We have so many platforms where people post how an interview is. If you go to Glassdoor, they'll let you know some of the interview questions that companies typically ask. If you actually, and mind you, all this information is posted anonymously, so people are posting this freely. If you go to Glassdoor and click on the company and you look up interview, there will be past employees or past candidates that may not have been offered a job that more than happy to tell you, hey, these are the questions that were asked. This is the person or the department I interviewed with. They'll even give you the length of time it took them to get back. I've read reviews where someone said, hey, I interviewed, never heard back from the company. I've read reviews where, hey, I interviewed with the company, I got an offer within 2 weeks. So you want to be able to actually look this information up. This information is literally at your fingertips. There's no reason why you can't look this information up. Next thing, you want to have your answers ready. And you also want to have some type of plan of action in place. You know, when I say have your answers ready, you know, we're talking about the typical questions that most companies ask in the interview. And most of it is, you know, what interests you about the job? Why do you think this job fits you? What are some of your biggest accomplishments? You also have them that ask about the challenges that you faced with previous employers. You know, tell me about a time when XYZ happened. You know, tell me about a time when you were faced with some challenge or some type of a disagreement that you had with a coworker. These are behavior interview questions that they're asking. They're asking to see how do you react in a particular situation. So you want to be prepared for these questions. And again, you can actually go online and Google some of the top interview questions that they're going to ask. And also keep in mind, they're also going to ask industry-related questions. They're not going to ask just questions about yourself. They're going to ask how you can actually bring value to their organization and how your experience is going to correlate with what their company offers. So don't get hung up on all the behavior questions. Those questions are pretty much standard with any interview, but also realize that you're going to also have to answer questions that's going to be related directly to that job that you're interviewing for. And those questions are going to vary, you know, across the industry, depending on what job you're interviewing for. Those questions are going to be different. So you want to make sure that you can, whatever question they ask, that you can showcase value and show how you can be a solution to their organization. Next one is you want to have questions. And I tell a lot of my clients and candidates that I work with, sometimes it's not about the answers. Sometimes it's the questions that can be the determining factor. If you're in an interview and they're wrapping it up and you have not one question, some people can see that as, you know, you're not even interested. You know, that this is something that, you may not be interested in doing, because most people that want to pursue or go to the next step, they're going to inquire about that. They're going to inquire about, hey, what's the typical day in this role? You know, some of the questions may also evolve about the position itself. How has this position evolved since it was created? You know, get a brief history about the role. This should clear up whether or not this position is for you or not. You also want to ask about past employees that were in this position previous to you. What have past employees done to succeed in this position? You know, knowing how the organization measures achievements is something that's going to be pertinent to your success. You want to make sure that you know what you're getting into and what it takes to be successful in this role. You know, you want to also make it a top priority to know, what is the priority for this position in the next 3 months? What are some of the challenges I'm going to face in this role? What is some of the challenges a person may face in this role? You know, so you want to actually figure out, what do you see this person doing in the first 90 days in this position or the first 3 months in this position? You know, this puts yourself in the position and you can see yourself working with the company together. You know, you're not seeing yourself as just this is a temporary role. You really want to be able to grow into this position and be a successful asset for the organization. I have a question that most people normally don't ask, but I have people that have asked it that were pretty, I called it a bold question. And some people, after they're wrapping it up, they may say, how do I measure up with past candidates that interviewed for this position? What were they lacking that prevented them to move forward in the hiring process? Sometimes you may want to know, hey, how do I measure up? And you also want to know what prevented the other people that interviewed before me from getting this job. That'll let you, and it opens the door to expand on some of the actual achievements or some of the things that were lacking in other candidates. If they say, hey, we've been interviewing people, but this person doesn't have this, everyone we interviewed may not have this particular skill set that we're looking for. That's your goal, to start pumping yourself up with that particular achievement or that particular credential they may be looking for that everyone else was lacking. So sometimes you want to figure out what's their pain, what's preventing them from filling this position, and that way you can come with a solution and say, hey, I have that credential, or I have that solution. Let me expand on it. Let me tell you how I can implement this in the organization. And that's going to make you stand out from everyone else that interviewed for that job. So it's about, like I said, it's not necessarily about the answers that you give in an interview. Sometimes it falls the questions that you ask, because the questions can open doors and open pain with an organization that would never have been revealed just through a regular Q&A session. So you want to definitely be able to find a way that you can become that solution, and the only way you can find out how you're going to be the solution is to reveal what their challenges are. And that's really comes down to being a challenger altogether. So that's why I said that's a bold question. Most people won't ask it, but there's some people out there that will challenge the interview and say, hey, what was everyone else lacking? Let me find out where your pain is. So that's something to look at as well. I hope that answers your question as far as acing an interview. Research, know your interviewer, answers ready, and have some type of plan of action in place, and ask questions. And we talked about plan of action, about having some type of plan in place as far as what solutions are you going to implement through your first months of employment. And that's definitely something that's crucial as well. The next question that we had was, how do I distinguish myself from other applicants? How do I make myself competitive for entry-level jobs right out of college? And I said the tools, new grads. And this is anyone that's looking for entry-level. It's not just for new grad, for people that just recently graduated. This is for anyone that may even be re-entering the workforce. The tools that you need, especially for new grads, and I put it actually on here, some of the tools that are there that you want to take a look at. I put a website under the title, which is bestjobsforgrads.com. If you're not logged on, maybe you dialed in and you're not unable to see my screen. It's Best Jobs with an S, the number 4, grads, grads.com. And this is a website that's pretty much dedicated for entry-level positions. They have various internships, mentorships. They have preceptorships on there, and also entry-level positions. So this particular site is dedicated solely for recent college grads. Right out of college, you have to also keep in mind, people that are recently graduate, a lot of their experience is very, very limited. And most of the time, your experience is your selling point, because you're trying to sell your experience and your prior solutions to the employer. So this is when you're heavily relying on your network and past professional encounters. And this is what new grads really are going to have to rely on. And many don't understand how your college years lay the foundation for your professional years to come. So when you're in college, many people don't take this seriously, but you should be also finding ways that you should be getting internships, informational interviews, networking, and mentorships. This is the time to do this. You want to make sure that you're taking advantage of this, because a lot of internships may turn into full-time positions. I know when I was in undergrad, many of the students, their first job that they did obtain following graduation was a company that they did an internship with their sophomore, junior year. So again, many people aren't taking these seriously when they're in college, so when they get out of college, like you said, they're looking for a job. And most jobs now, unless they specify they're looking for an entry-level type of employee, most of them are requiring that you're coming with some type of experience in that field. Also, if you're looking for entry-level jobs, it goes back to I talked about or I spoke about previous sessions is looking at niche boards, looking at particular boards that are dedicated solely to entry-level positions. You can do this just by doing a keyword search. They'll bring up multiple job boards that are dedicated solely to recent grads, and that's why I put this one up here first, because this is a very popular one. But there are other ones out there that are dedicated just for recent grads that you can take a look at. You want to leverage your existing relationships, and also start requesting introductions if you're on LinkedIn, and start making yourself available for networking events that are in your particular field. Again, this is not only just targeted towards entry level or recent grads. This is anyone that's trying to either break through in a new market or just expand their network in their current industry. You want to get out there and start networking, start finding the who's who in the particular industry, and start leveraging those relationships. And I'm seeing that a lot of people are just explicitly applying online, and they're not taking the time to unplug and actually reach out to these people on a one-on-one, face-to-face basis. And you have to remember, a lot of people are getting their jobs through referrals. They're finding someone that they know, and a lot of companies are actually relying on referrals because it's basically is a little bit more economically feasible for companies to get an employee to refer someone versus outsourcing this particular task to a third party. So you definitely want to take advantage of those internships and networking. Again, this can include job shadowing if you know a particular company or a particular industry that allows you to job shadow someone. This is usually prevalent on smaller organizations. Startups allow, they really are always looking for someone that can come in and want to pick their brain. So look at job shadowing or volunteering opportunities as well. What you're trying to do is to not only build up your network, but build up your exposure to the industry. Because when you start applying for these entry-level jobs, they want to also know that you can at least bring something to the table, even if it's just exposure. So that's something that you want to look at as far as building your network and building upon past relationships that you made throughout your college years. And I hope that was able to answer your question as far as the tools for new grads. The next question was, what are prospective employers looking for on LinkedIn before contacting an employee for hire? And I can only tell you, not only on LinkedIn, but in general, what employers are looking at. But I can also tell you at LinkedIn, as far as LinkedIn at profiles, there are keyword driven. And what I mean by that, if you have a LinkedIn profile, and depending on what industry that you're in, the keywords, of course, are going to be different. So there's not one thing that they're looking at per se on your profile, but I can tell you how they're going to find you, and that's by keywords. Just like a Google search or any type of search engine, it's going off the words that you have in your profile. And if you have a skimpy profile, or a profile that just has one-liners, and you really aren't using that profile to expand on what you actually did, you're going to be very hard to find. And there's there are many profiles that are keyword rich. They know the words to use, they know the words that are used in the industry, and when people are searching for a person in that particular role, guess what? They come on top when they filter through candidates because they have the most keywords in their profile. It's a match. So when you actually are putting together your LinkedIn profile, you want to make sure that you're using keywords that are industry specific, and you also want to put yourself in the employer's shoes. If you were an employer, or if you was a recruiter and you were looking for someone in a particular field, again, I don't know what particular industry that you're in. I'll use accounting because I don't know why I have accounting on my mind tonight, but I'm going to say accounting. Say if you're an accountant, and you do particular part, you may, your niche may be taxes. What are you going to put in there that going to bring you to the top of the list if an employer were looking for you. If I just put in the word accounting or accountant, I'm going to get, hundreds if not thousands of profiles. What can you do to narrow that down? What particular skill set do you have? I know some people, if I'm looking for a person in the tax arena, I might be looking for a CPA. So, after accounting, I might put a comma and put CPA. That's going to narrow down my search. So anyone that doesn't have CPA in their profile, guess what? They're not going to come up. So if you get my drift, the keywords are very important if employers are doing the search. Once they're able to locate you and they're able to pull up your profile, based off the keywords, these are the 3 things that employers look at. And this is not only with your LinkedIn profile, this is your resume in general. They're looking at your education. Do you meet the educational requirements that are listed in the job? Whether it's preferred or whether it's required, are you meeting the educational requirements? The next thing, they're going to look at your experience. Do you have the experience? If so, how much? Does your experience directly correlate with the job opening or request? Do you have any transferable skills in here that can be applied to this position? Next thing they're looking for are solutions. And solutions, and some people may label as in their resume what they've done, their achievements, their accomplishments. I call them solutions. What solutions have you implemented for your current employer or past employers? What solutions can you potentially implement with my organization? Did they work? If so, how? They're also looking for resolutions. They're also looking for impact. How did it impact the organization? Did you increase something? Did you create something? Did you streamline something? These are the things that they're looking for, to see if this person would bring value to the organization or bring value to the position that they're hiring for. At the end of the day, what's going to make you different from all the applicants that are applying to that same job is what you can bring to the table. What can you offer? Because keep in mind, the first 2 things, may match to a T. You may have everyone that applies to that job that has those same educational credentials, may have that same degree, may have that same certification. Your solutions, your experience, that's going to be your driver. That's what's going to set you apart. So that's what you should be focusing on, because you may meet the hard skills. You may meet the educational requirements, and guess what? Maybe 80 to 90% that apply to the job meet those minimum educational requirements. But what else are you going to bring to the table that no one else is? So that's what they look for when they look at various employees or potential employees to bring into the organization, especially on LinkedIn profiles. It goes back to having those keywords, and it really goes putting time in creating that profile to make it as marketable as possible. And people don't understand your LinkedIn profile, it's a reputation of you. It's your marketing. This is how you're marketing yourself. If you had a business, you wouldn't just market your business with 1 or 2 sentences. Guess what? You would never get any customers. So you want to be as detailed as possible. Next one is, how do I make myself marketable after being out of work for several years? Best ways to get interviewed now, and how to get to the hiring manager. I put all 3 of these questions in this one slide. I'll repeat them again. How do I make myself marketable after being out of work for several years? That was the first one. The second one was best ways to get interviewed now. And the third one is, how do I get to the hiring manager? And my question to you is, what is your plan? When people ask, how do I make myself marketable? What is your plan? How do you plan to get yourself out there to the market? Many times, most job seekers don't have a marketing plan in place. It's, apply and wait. That's their plan. Hey, I just apply and wait. So you really want to take an assessment. Now, this goes back to looking at what's currently working. You want to take inventory. You want to make an honest evaluation. What are you currently doing that's working, and what are you currently doing that's not working? And you want to start asking yourself those questions. If you keep doing what you're doing, guess what? You're going to keep getting what you're getting. And if you're getting nothing, you're going to keep getting nothing unless you find a way to change what you're currently doing. So you want to take an assessment, and this is the time to be truly honest with yourself. Can you do more? What are you missing? What is your marketing plan? That's your next one. How are you currently marketing yourself? When someone asks, how do I make myself more marketable? What are you doing now to make yourself marketable, period? So you have to really think about this. Are you just using a resume? Is your resume and cover letter your sole marketing material? Are you doing anything outside of that to market your skill set? So it's not about making yourself more marketable. It's how can you expand on current marketing efforts that you're making. And maybe it is your marketing material. Maybe your resume is not as marketable as it could be. That's something that you're going to have to look at. Is your resume full of nothing but tasks and responsibilities? Or do you have real solutions and accomplishments in your resume that's going to catch an employer's eye? So that's when it goes back to, taking a true assessment on, what can you do to put yourself out there and compete with everyone else that are applying to these same jobs. Relationships. Are you building meaningful relationships with people in your industry, with decision makers? Currently, think about it. Answer this question while we're right on the phone. What networking events do you currently have planned to attend? And I'm pretty sure 9 out of 10 of you are going to say none. There's only a handful of people that may have something on a calendar that they're going to attend that's going to push them closer to their employment goals. And there's so many so many events going on now that you can be attending, and majority of them are, they're free. You also want to answer the question, as far as the solution, why should I hire you? What problem are you going to solve for my organization? This is something that should be in your resume. Again, it goes back to putting in those solutions, putting in those accomplishments, showing what you've solved for past organizations. Are you following up? When you're applying to these positions, maybe hundreds of positions. I've worked with candidates that they've been out of work for a while, and they've been applying to jobs for 6 to 8 months, and equivalent to a couple hundred applications they've gone through. And I may ask, have you followed up with any of them? And you'll be amazed, out of all those applications, no one has ever followed up with not one company at all. So are you following up with the decision makers? Even if you get a no, that's fine. At least it's to getting feedback. What needs to change? Figure out why you received that no. Why weren't you a competitive candidate? I also say look at everyone else that's applying to the job. I know LinkedIn's now, I know for their positions, they made, if you have an account with them, you actually can see the other applicants that apply to those positions. And people don't understand how much leverage that is. You can see who you're actually competing with. And the people that do get the job, how do you measure up to them? What did they have that you didn't have? Go to their LinkedIn profile, evaluate that. So when you want to actually reach out and find ways to get that interview or make yourself marketable, it really goes back to marketing yourself and having some type of plan in place. Whether it be your resume, whether it be your cover letter, your LinkedIn, attending association and industry-related organizations, anything like this, you definitely want to be a part of and have some way implemented in your job search plan. And many people don't have a plan in place. They're just applying to positions. So you want to make sure that you have a plan in place and you're able to move forward and take advantage of some of the resources that are out there. The best way to get in touch with hiring managers, again, this goes back to using the technology that's out there. 10, 15 years ago, these platforms didn't exist. Now you can research who the director is of a company, who the manager is of a company, who the HR manager is. You can research this. So if you want to find out who a hiring manager is, know the department that you're interviewing or applying to, and look for the person that's over that department. You can do this on LinkedIn. You can do a Google search. You can do a company search. Just look up that company and just view the employees solely at that company. Filter it through demographics, depending on your city and state, and job title. And that's going to narrow down the people that are in that department and the decision makers that are in that department. That's how you're going to find out who the hiring manager is. Let's go ahead and go to the next question. And I put this here because I want to make everyone aware what got you here won't get you there. Are you prepared? What changes are you ready to make? And you have to keep in mind, I've worked with candidates that, worked for organizations for 10, 15 years. They haven't interviewed for 10 or 15 years. How you got your job 10 years ago or even 5 years ago may not be how you get your current job or your current position. Getting a job or career has been more and more competitive, and candidates are using technology to their advantage. They're using it as leverage. And if you've been out of the loop far as looking for work, or you haven't had to look for work, I know some people that were gainfully employed most of their life, and now they're thrown to the wolves in this world of job seekers. And they don't know where to start. And I've had, back in the day, hey, all I had to do was submit an application and, I was hired. It doesn't work like that anymore. You're submitting that same application that the other 500 people are submitting. You have much more competition now. And you have heavier criteria that companies are looking for. People are being more mindful of what they're spending their dollars on. And the technology is also a way that people are getting their message out faster and to individuals that normally would have been out of their network or out of their reach. So you also want to realize, what got you here won't get you there. And you have to be willing and ready and open for change, and be prepared for what you may have to implement to be competitive with everyone else. And I had someone that says, I don't use social media. Guess what? You're at a big disadvantage, because nowadays I can't think of a company that doesn't use social media in their hiring process. So if you're not using social media, hey, you're at a disadvantage, because your competition is. So, you have to be willing to make those changes, and you have to be willing to be prepared. The final question that I've had with a previous workshop was about career change, and I pretty much used some of the same pointers that I used, because it really didn't change. The question was pretty similar about tips for changing careers, and I also had someone that asked about moving from the entertainment field to business, and they want to know how they can be taken seriously. And it seems like they're trying to obtain a managerial position for a company with leadership skills in areas other than the particular job field they're currently in. So it sounds like they're trying to make a career move in a totally different industry that it sounds like they have very limited skills. And this is for tips for job seekers in general. And I mentioned before, a career change, as simple as it sounds, is not going to be done overnight. No, this is something that really takes time. It takes a strategic plan. not only to find the job, but to secure it with limited experience. And that's really going to be your challenge. And the first thing you need to understand, or the first question that's going to be asked, is why the change? Especially if you've been in a field either half of your working career, that's going to be something that they're going to ask. They want to know your motives. What's triggering the change? What transferable skills can you apply to this new particular industry that you're trying to pursue? You want to evaluate what you can actually apply to the current industry that you're in. How can that transfer over to the industry that you want to actually find yourself in? You want to also look at flexibility. Are you flexible? Again, this is something that's going to take time. It's nothing that's going to happen overnight. And are you going to be flexible with your time on getting in there? As far as taking an entry-level position, if you have 10, 15 years of experience in one particular industry, are you flexible of taking a pay cut? That's the reality. You're not going to get paid that 10, 15 years of experience as you did as a manager in one industry, because you're not bringing that same skill set to this industry. You're going to have limited experience. And unfortunately, that may call for taking a pay cut. Are you open to that? You also want to look at ways that you can currently get experience. Maybe you don't want to jump ship right away. Maybe you want to make this a gradual change. How are you going to incorporate the experience in this new industry in your current position? That means start getting industry exposure. You're going to want to look at industry-related workshops, associations that you can join in that industry, so you can start networking with people that are experts in that particular vertical. So you want to start putting yourself out there. Even though you may be gainfully employed in industry you may no longer want to be in, take that time to get the exposure and the experience in the industry that you do want to pursue. This is also going to uncover what the job really entails. And many people may not know what the job entails because they're outside looking in, and believe me, everything that glitter is not gold. You may see a position or an industry that you may find very attractive and something that you want to pursue, and once you get in it, it may not be what you thought it was. So that way, getting the experience or getting the exposure will allow you to know, what this job or this industry really entails. Again, you're going to have to consider an entry-level position, and you may also have to consider relocation. And I say that because, the position that you may be looking for may not be a position that's local to you. Are you open to traveling to your dream job? Your dream job may not be in your city or state. Are you open to relocating to obtain that career change, or to even attain that experience, even though it may be entry level? So you're really going to have to take a serious look at, if relocation is a possibility for you. The tips I can give you for career changers is definitely make sure that you do your homework. Whether it's getting a mentor, whether it's shadowing someone, to really know if this is a position that you want to take. Find out what it takes to get in that industry. Again, that goes back to looking at people that are currently in that role. What is the experience that that they have, and what is the credentials that they hold. What's going to make you competitive for that industry, and you're going to have to start working towards that. Again, networking, getting out there, learning the who's who in that industry definitely is going to be something that you should be doing. Even if you're in your current industry, it's not going to hurt to start networking with people that are in the industry that you're trying to actually get exposure to. The other question that was part of this one is entering a field that's totally different. I think the entertainment field to business, and how you're going to be taken seriously. That's how you're going to be taken seriously. If you actually start building on getting to that industry now, again, it goes back to it's not going to happen overnight. You may have to stay in that, whatever that entertainment field, whatever you're doing now, you may have to continue to do that for the next year. But in that year, you should also be slowly building up the industry that you want to pursue. So when you do pursue them, they will take you seriously because you'll have a year of experience or a year of exposure under your belt. And that includes volunteering, getting a mentor, something that's going to show that you're taking steps towards this particular field. So once you can show that, companies will take you seriously, especially for an entry-level position. You're going to be bringing more to the table than most. And don't underestimate your transferable skills. What you're currently doing now may, somehow relate to what you're trying to pursue. So don't underestimate, the skills that you currently have that you can actually implement in the field that you're trying to actually get into. So I hope that actually helped with your answer. And I'm going to go ahead and move on. I think that was the last question. This is my contact information. I'm available on all social media. You can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn under my first and last name. Visit the website. Again, we do this every Monday from 7 to 8. So if you ever miss a workshop, log on to YouTube and check her channel out. Subscribe to her channel. That way that you can always be abreast to the new workshops that we do, and you can always have access to them. And I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up to questions and see what questions that we currently have now. And let me take a look. I do have a question. Is it okay to take notes in an interview? If you take notes in the interview, it can become a distraction if you're sitting down with just a notepad and you're jotting down everything that they say. I don't see anything wrong if they're telling you about the interview process or telling you what you can actually be looking forward to, and you may be jotting down something like that. But if you're sitting there, trying to take down everything they say verbatim, they're not capturing, what they're trying to capture in the interview, and that's your interest level, seeing if this is, the interest level may be, of course, in you taking notes, but it really takes away from that interaction that the interviewer wants to have with the interviewee. So you can take notes, and I would say very brief notes, like if I was asking about the hiring process and they say, they're giving me a particular times and dates or an ETA or something like that, yeah, jot it down, no problem. But if you're sitting there trying to take notes on, everything that comes out their mouth, they might look at it, well, this is something that, you should know, because if they're rattling off the history, you should already come to the table with some of the, with a background of what they're going to say as far as the company history or the workflow, and you really shouldn't have to take notes on that. So you really want to, I would really ask what you would definitely take notes on. If you were to bring out a notebook and notepad, what are you taking notes on? Because they really want to have a dialogue with you. They want to make this, as something that's not only informative, but they also want to be able to ask you questions and get your feedback. And they don't want your head buried in a notebook, jotting down everything they say. So they want to make it as interactive as possible. But if you need to take a notes for, like I said, something that may do with quantitative data, numbers, giving you times and dates, go for it. But I wouldn't sit there trying to take down and jot down notes for something that maybe you could remember, or pretty much they're trying to engage you in, like the day in the life of a particular role. Hey, if I was in this role, what would a typical day be like? Now, I'm not going to sit there and write down what they're going to do each and every day. That's kind of something that they want they want your participation with. So you can't really participate in a conversation if you're trying to take down everything the person says. So I think, if being honest with you, I think it would be a distraction if you sat there and took notes while they're trying to give you an overview of their expectations. Okay, I do have a hand up. I'm going to unmute your line so you can now speak.
muted.
Hello, you're on.
Yes, hello. I just had a question when you were going through your LinkedIn information, and I was wondering, what is the best way to approach leaders in your field through LinkedIn to get an informational interview?
Okay, so the best way, I'm going to mute your line real quick so I won't have the echo, okay?
Okay.
Okay, the best way to find leaders in your field would do a LinkedIn search. And the way you can do a LinkedIn search is you can do a advanced search. And so depending on the field that you're on, you can actually do a search depending, narrow it down through the company. You can narrow it down through a particular state, city. So you want to do an industry search. You can do a filter search on LinkedIn. And that way you're going to capture everyone with a particular job title. So you can break it down. I don't know exactly what type of leader that you're looking for, but if you're looking for, I'm just going to say that you're in a marketing role or accounting role, you may want to be looking for a manager and director in that role. I will reach out to them, do a warm introduction if you can. And when you do a warm introduction, let them know that, and of course, if you're going to introduce yourself, do your homework on that particular company. Know a little bit about the company and say that you want to know, you want to learn more. So you're going to break the ice with your initial introduction, but also with your initial knowledge of the company. So you're going to bring something to them to let them know that you're interested, in their organization, but you'll like to learn more about, their workflow, some of the things that they maybe have coming up in the upcoming quarter, so you want to bring something up that they can actually say, hey, I would get together with you 15-30-minute conversation to let you know the direction of our organization. And an informational interview doesn't have to be a face-to-face. You could do an informal informational interview on a phone. Have a 30-minute call or a 15-minute call with that person just to get feedback on it may be an existing position or just, hey, what does your future hiring look like? What are your future quarter look like? What does quarter 3 look like? And you also want to bring something to the table to let them know that you've done your homework on your end in regarding their company. You don't want to come totally oblivious to what they do. You want to at least have some type of knowledge because that's going to be your icebreaker. And I hope that was able to answer your question. And I'm going to unmute your line and you can tell me.
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I went ahead and muted that line. Let me see, do we have any more questions? Okay, I don't see any more questions tonight. I really do want to appreciate everyone for coming out and thank everyone. We are at the top of the hour. After this workshop, there is a survey that you can take. If there's only 10 questions, they just usually tell us how the workshop was, any topics that you'd like to cover in the future, what can we do better, what can we do to get more interaction, so just give us a real honest feedback on how this Q&A session was, and if you would attend again, and also let us know any upcoming topics that you'd like for us to actually expand on in the future. So it's a 10-question survey that we'll love for you to take after the workshop, and I really appreciate your time, and I hope everyone has a great day, and hope to see you next Monday. Again, we do it every Monday from 7 to 8. Have a good day, and thank you.